Ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned in just a moment. Inspiring Honesty with host Greg Brahe and co-host Bob Greaves. In just a moment.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Inspiring Honesty. I'm your host, Greg Brahe, and I'm an atheist. Today I'm going to be joined once again by my incredible co-host, Bob Greaves, and I'm excited because this is the first time. I don't know how long we've been using it now. I believe we started a few weeks ago, but this is the first time I've gotten to listen to the custom-made theme music that Bob wrote for the show. So thank you for that, Bob. Bob, are you there? Have I lost you? All right. Apparently, Bob's not there anymore. But
hello.
Today, hi, Bob. Are you there now?
I can hear you now. Yeah, I was. Everything went blank for me. I heard nothing.
Oh. Well, such is a live show, right?
I
was just saying thank you for that amazing theme song. I don't know exactly how long they've been using it now. I know we tried a couple weeks ago, but it was the first time I got to listen to it coming into the show, so thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. I had fun putting it together.
Now, today, I had a special topic in mind, and this is actually inspired by we had talked about a different topic last week, hadn't we? I had a different idea, but then I remember that last week we decided what we wanted to talk about this week, didn't
we? We did.
So I'll put off the topic that I had decided on here, which was tribalism, by the way, and what we can do to get past it as a species. But that one can be for next week. And this week, we can continue last week's conversation. I just remembered that we had put that together. So last week, we had discussed honesty, specifically being half of the title of this show. Honesty in many different forms, the different ways that it takes. But you had suggested at the end of the show that we discussed the first part of it and how we are in the inspiring side. How do we inspire honesty? Yeah. So since you were the one who suggested that topic, I want to give you the opportunity to open us up on that, Bob.
Yeah, well, I think that part of what made me think of that was that in talking about honesty, I made the assertion that is a very unpopular assertion to make, but I do think that it's the assertion most people silently make, and that is that honesty is not the best policy. That there's a sense in which honesty represents a form of vulnerability that I think that some people are not entitled to. And now I realize that can be easily abused. I mean, so the IRS isn't entitled to honesty here. But the truth is that if we expect people to be honest with us, I think we need to also find ways of interacting with people, behaving that inspires that honesty rather than just demands it. In fact, I would even go so far as to say that it's a dishonest thing to think that people just ought to be honest with me. That's being unrealistic about what it is that somebody might actually really need from me before risking honesty with me is something they should be comfortable doing. And so with that, I thought that it might be a good idea for us to talk about, so how do we inspire honesty?
That's an interesting way of looking at that. I have to say that I can't help but to think that you and I had a very different lens through which we were viewing the conversation from last week. And when I was saying honesty is the best policy, I was looking at it more in a a personal sense in what I think that people should strive to do with others, but not so much in what people should expect from others. And I think that you were seeing it from the opposite end a little bit more than I was. Am I correct in that?
I think I'm looking at it in both ways. In that, I'll tell you, if I know somebody who uses information that I honestly give them in a manner to just repeatedly take advantage of me, I don't feel any obligation to be honest with that person. I don't.
But Bob, isn't that sort of begging the question to some extent in saying that you don't feel it necessary to be honest with them, but one thing you can be honest with them about is how they use the information in an inappropriate manner.
Oh, yeah, I wouldn't hide from them the fact that sorry, I'm just not going to be honest with you. I wouldn't hide that.
I don't think that there's anything dishonest about telling somebody that they're not entitled to a particular piece of information, and in saying that you simply don't trust them with it given your past history. But I think that there is something dishonest behind simply avoiding giving information to somebody, or avoiding a person, or coming up with an excuse as to why you won't tell them.
Well, I hear what you're saying, except anytime you come up with a rule, once you have the rules down, the truth is there's no such thing as a rule you can give as to how a cooperative relationship ought to work without there being the possibility of a person who intends to manipulate finding a way of getting that rule to work for them and not for you. That's just the nature of rules. It's the nature of behavior. It's the nature of creativity. And so I hear what you're saying, but what you're saying assumes that such a thing is even really possible, independent of the kind of cooperative desire that other people may have. And I think that's an assumption that we sometimes find is just not a valid one, and that it might be good to have a variety of different rules one might operate by, and willingness to switch from one to the other if it's being taken advantage of. In a similar way, like I suggest to parents who like a particular parenting style. Oh, no, don't do that. You need to find a parenting style that's effective with the child, not the parenting style you particularly care for. And if you have a child who's taking advantage of the way you are trying to be fair, you need to change the way you're being fair.
I agree with that. Actually, when Ann and I had Casey, the decision that I made was that I was going to be a kind and loving father, and it turned out that didn't work. So now I just beat him mercilessly, and
I think that's excellent.
It works much better.
Yikes! Yikes! No, but I tell you this: by the time that child gets to be 8 or 9, they will start to try to use the way they can expect your behavior to kind of paint you into a corner, and you'll find yourself getting frustrated while you're trying to follow your rules, while they're just sitting there king of the road, and you don't realize all the power they have over you. If now, not all kids will do that, but some kids will, and when they do that, that's when you have to realize the parental style that you choose. That, for example, 3 strikes and then we have serious consequences, or finding out what the child's currency is, so that you know what it is they're willing to negotiate. Excuse me, I got hiccups here. So that you know what they're willing to negotiate for. You may need to make adjustments and changes in your parental style, and you're going to have to do that. But I would say this, that you shouldn't be finding changes in your parental style just to make sure I'm winning. But you're really looking for the best interest of the child if you are a loving, caring parent. You just don't want to give to the child a set of rules or whatever it is that is something they learn to manipulate and take advantage of. But now I'm just using that as an analogy of other things. In any relationship where honesty is expected, if there is ever a rule for that honesty, a dishonest and manipulative person will find ways of making those rules something you have to stick to, while they're not sticking to it, and they find a way of taking advantage of you. as a result, that means that although you might have certain policies, you have to be aware of the fact that, particularly with a person who's sociopathic or a person who is extremely manipulative or an addict, you may find yourself having to, throw those rules out and not abide by them. For
So
their sake.
what I'm getting from your statement here is something that I've known and exploited my entire life, is that the codification of rules, by definition, creates a path around them that is just waiting to be discovered. Is that just sort of what you're saying?
Exactly. And people are creative enough, and not only that, but the one thing about rules in any social relationship is this: you can never, ever, ever really know what another person is thinking. You can never, ever really know what their motives are. You may know yours, and you might not. But because everybody operates from that hidden hand while they're playing poker, the rules, you have no way of knowing if they're being followed.
I can grant you all this, but I still don't think that it really is that consequential in the point that I'm trying to make. Is that I see this as a sort of a dichotomous equation here. When we look at honesty as the best policy, it's either, and admittedly this is a bit of a false dichotomy, but it's either you're honest or you're dishonest. Of course, there are shades of gray in there, but I think that faced with a choice of being honest or being dishonest, the honesty is the better way to go. Now, honesty does not mean full disclosure.
I would say that honesty is the better way to go if that is a better way to go. But sometimes honesty isn't the better way to go because, if you're dealing with a dishonest person, by your being honest with them, you're giving them you're giving them all the advantages.
But I think that you're looking at honesty in a different way that I am, and saying being honest with them. If you're dealing with a dishonest person and you're aware that you're dealing with a dishonest person, then being honest with them is simply saying, I don't want to tell you that, or that's none of your business. That is an honest statement. And it's not being deceitful to say that, nor is it hiding something in any way other than saying, I don't trust you enough to tell you that. And that is the kind of honesty that I'm talking about. It's being honest in your interactions, but that doesn't mean, we can bring up poker as a great example. You said everybody's playing with their hidden hand. And you're absolutely right. I love playing poker. I'm a Texas Hold'em fan myself, and I play with a hidden hand all the time. But honesty doesn't mean I tell everybody, like, hey, I have a pair of aces in here. Hey, I have 4 aces now with the cards that came out there. No, it means that when the river's down and all bets are in, I show my hand, and even if the person I'm playing against thinks that he lost to me, but I actually lost to him, I am compelled by honesty to tell him, no, you're not seeing this. You neglected to see that you have a straight flush, not just a straight.
Before it's time to show your hand, though, you wouldn't mind bluffing them or allowing them to just...
That's part of the game. Sure. What I mean, outside of the honesty...
Relationships, for some people, are a game.
That's true, but within the context of that game, the rules are... I don't know. I think that this is kind of stretching the analogy a bit too far, but the rules are what you need to be honest about, and the interactions are what you need to be honest about. In saying we are playing poker, and these are the rules of poker. Then
but I'll tell you what if I was talking to someone now with you? I've never had any reason to feel like I was experiencing any kind of vulnerability being honest with you. I think we've had great conversations, and I.
Well, you're entirely wrong on that, but it's
hello
good
again,
because I've been tracking things.
You're cutting in and out, and I can't hear what you're saying.
Oh, I'm just saying I'm putting together a manifesto to blackmail you with, but I'm glad.
Very good, very good. But if you and I were having that kind of a conversation, and I was telling you that, look, I don't feel you're entitled to that information, and you were to tell me, I expect you to be honest. I mean, you say you're a Christian, you say this, and so I expect you to be honest. I might look you straight in the eye, give you an odd little look, and tell you a lie, and imply by every look I give you that I am telling you a lie, but I wouldn't necessarily tell you that I'm telling you a lie. I don't see anything wrong with my doing that, because there's a sense in which that's communication. Also, as a linguist,
that wouldn't work here because I can't see you right now. Just throwing that out.
Yes, yeah. But there's a thing called veiled speech. And I think, was it Stephen, I can't remember his name. There's a fellow that's on YouTube all the time talking about veiled speech. And he's got a great example of it. One of the examples he gives is this. You're driving a date home. And, you're at that dating stage. It's kind of awkward. And as you're driving her home, you might say to her, she might have mentioned to you in the evening that she's a tremendous photographer. She has a lot of fun taking pictures. And so just as you're pulling up to her curb or her driveway, you ask her something like, would this be a good time for you to show me some of your photographs? And then she says, well, I don't think so. Maybe we could do that some other time. Now, I'm saying that was a very dishonest conversation, because what he's really trying to do is he's trying to say, can I come into your comfort zone, into your house, in an area where, the territory changes and the potential for intimacy is changing, and the woman is saying, I'm not ready to sleep with you yet. Now, they didn't actually discuss that. It would have been far more honest for the guy to say, so am I going to get lucky tonight? And she's going to say, I don't think so. The truth is, it's a moment of awkwardness, and there's a moment of vulnerability. And so people are using veiled speech to see where the relationship is going, but they don't do it directly. And it's direct enough that they know what they're talking about. She's not really knowing if that's what he's getting at, but she's wondering, and she's refusing to show him the photographs now, because just in case that is what he's getting to, and she's not ready for it. So that's a form of veiled speech.
She might be really confused if that is all he wanted to do. He's like, all right, thank you for showing me the photographs. I'm going to go home now.
Right. But the thing, and that could be what's going on. I mean, you can date Lieutenant Data, I guess. But the point being is that is a very real part of the awkwardness of relationship. And I'm arguing that veiled speech serves a purpose. It gives people a gracious out. It allows us to explore directions while protecting people's dignity, while protecting our own. It is a form of, if you want to be technical, dishonesty. And I don't see anything wrong with it. The honesty would have been too raw, too crass, too whatever. And there's a sense in which, so I'm saying that I don't think we're really being honest about honesty when we're talking about it.
I can agree to some extent in saying that your observations are accurate, and I think that what we're doing is looking at these from a descriptive sense on your end, and on my end more of an appellative sense. I don't think that there's anything explicitly wrong with
just being bad. Yeah, but I think that we can talk about honesty, but the truth is, the issue of honesty comes up when someone is feeling like someone is being dishonest with them, and that's one time when the issue might come up. And what I was suggesting is this: I do believe that it is a healthier environment, a healthier relationship where honesty can be risked and can thrive, and where honesty can't be risked and can't thrive. There's something unhealthy in that relationship, definitely. So it's really important. But at the same time, I'm wondering, instead of just feeling that making honesty a policy, what if honesty was something someone did with you, not because they felt any moral compelling desire to, well, I better be honest, because I'm going to feel guilty if I'm not. But what if they want to be honest with you because they like you? They honor you enough that they really do want to be honest with you. What do we do to inspire honesty so that when a person who maybe doesn't even possess the kind of morality that we want them to have would nonetheless want to be honest with you? So I see that this concept of honesty as a moral value is often, in my opinion, dishonestly one-sided.
Well, let me grab my soapbox here for just a moment and say this, that I think that comfort is a luxury for some and a necessity for others. And much like I open up every show and saying, hi, I'm your host, Greg Brahe, and I'm an atheist. Not everybody's capable of doing that. And sometimes that has nothing to do with what we're going to be talking about in the show. I mean, this show is a great example. What we're talking about has nothing to do with me being an atheist, but I open that show or the shows like that every week for a reason, because that term, that word is demonized and vilified in the world that we live in today, and not everybody has the comfort to or the ability to say something like that without risking huge amounts of their livelihood or even their lives. So I feel that those of us that are in the ability that the worst it could cause is some minor discomfort have a unique opportunity to go above and beyond and to do something that is exposing ourselves and taking a risk and being vulnerable intentionally, because not everybody has that luxury. And if we can do that, we can help change the culture in a way that will help afford
that can be a way of actually inspiring honesty by just coming forth with the potential of vulnerability. But I'll tell you what, if you do that and that person takes advantage of you for it, you might want to think about it next time.
Well, it's a risk that you take, but let's take a look at I mean, I don't have my pin with me right now. I used to be on this shirt, but the wash, I think, ate it when I forgot to take it off one day. Let's take a look at the LGBTQ movement for a moment and see how far it's come since people simply started coming out of the closet. Because in the past, it was not culturally acceptable. It was, as a matter of fact, a great way to turn yourself into a pariah or worse, to get yourself persecuted or even killed by letting people know that you are anything other than absolutely heterosexual. And that was a big problem. And the only way that we could get past that was by some people deciding to take that risk. And you're right. It really didn't turn out well for some of them. But
I think there's some people who should not take that risk. They're not in a position where that would be wise. And there are some people who are ready for that, ready to deal with it, or find that they can rise to the occasion. So, and because some people have done that, which has helped us, I don't think we can make an argument that all of them should have done that.
Well, I can certainly agree that not everybody should do that. As a matter of fact, there's a very strong thread that runs through the atheist community, the recovering from religion groups, things of that nature, that tells people, young atheists specifically, that are still dependent upon their parents, to not tell their parents that they're atheists, if that will cause them to be kicked out of their home or be uprooted and moved or sent off to a camp somewhere. They don't have control of their own lives in such a way that they can afford to do that. And You're right that it is, in those cases, it is not wise to be honest, and honesty is not.
So that means that honesty is not the best policy, that the best policy is to determine if this is a situation in which honesty is a reasonable, responsible risk.
That is a very fair point. But I guess the argument that I'm making is that honesty should be the goal.
Oh,
even in
definitely. I
those
can agree with you on
situations
that. A relationship is definitely and has to be admitted to oneself as lacking its healthy potential when honesty is something that cannot be taking place. Definitely.
I don't know where to go from that. We found such a great agreement point on that one. I think that it really does hinge on that point is regardless of whether or not you can be honest at the moment. I mean, some situations are absolutely prohibitive, and it's not a prudent choice to do that. Yes, you can make that choice if you want, but I think that honestly, forgive the unintentional pun there, we need to be honest with ourselves as well, and that means assessing the situation and saying, is this something I can handle? Is this something I can survive? Um, and I
Rather
really
than
don't think that
asking
we
if
can.
it's something I can survive, I also think it's very important. Is this something that can help the other person? That's also, if we're talking about honesty, we're also talking about a a social value, a value between in within the context of a relationship, and that decision I think has to also incorporate the best interests of the other person. You know, does this serve them? Let me give you an example. I worked in a company where there was some uh, there was some financial situations that could have put um, one of the owners in a very difficult situation that they didn't know about, and I did. The other owner died. I kept that information to myself for 7 years, uh, waiting to act in case it ever became an issue. And the reason I waited 7 years is that after 7 years, there would have been a limitation that would have been passed, where this would not have been any information that could have harmed them. And so I waited on that because it also would have put this person through a great deal of emotional stress and worry about something they would have been in no position to do anything about. There's a sense in which I wasn't honest with them, but to me, I felt that I think I did the right thing. And I can't give, I don't want to give out any details about what it was, but it was a very sad situation. And of course, when one of the owners died, everything started falling apart in the way everything was running, and it didn't need to fall apart any farther. Particularly with the death of a partner, so there's a sense there in which, I think that's another situation where I would say honesty wouldn't have been the best policy.
Well, we have a viewer comment here. It's a lengthy one, so allow me to indulge a moment. But it says, I'm surprised to hear this discussion on honesty between an atheist and a theist being discussed in terms of right and wrong. And I'm particularly surprised that Greg is allowing the discussion to be steered in that direction. I don't mean to be insulting. I really appreciate what I've perceived to be a fairly common atheist position, that right and wrong, good and bad, do not exist, and that we should rather view things in terms of healthy versus unhealthy, beneficial versus damaging. If we view the argument in these terms, then it's easy to see how there are many instances in which withholding truth or even lying to someone can be of benefit. Children don't need to know everything about every question they ask, and many adults are not ready to handle the complete truth about everything. The raw truth can, can, in some instances, drive a delicate person over the edge, perhaps even cause them a nervous breakdown. These are just a few examples among what may be an unlimited amount of examples that I can think of in which a lie is less damaging than the truth.
I totally agree with that comment. Totally agree with it. And because to me, morality is not based on behavior. Morality is based on the outcome of behavior. And the outcome of behavior can be, in some ways, predictably arbitrary. It's not as if behaving in a particular way always produces a particular outcome. And in certain situations, you may be able to reasonably anticipate that there would be certain outcomes. And in the best interest of another person, to the degree that you can be responsible for predicting what the outcome would be for the behavior, you engage in the behavior or not. And honesty is one of those behaviors, you know. So I would totally agree with the statement.
I absolutely also agree, and I feel effectively put in my place with that one. That I'm a little disappointed with myself for not framing it in such a way, and I think part of that comes from how I was looking at the terminology. And I do have to. I guess I have to explain a little bit more. From last week's show, the reason that we had gone into this topic was, or the thing that had inspired me to discuss this topic was the fact that I have friends who are going through some serious
Right.
marital issues, and that there have been situations where I feel there have been betrayals and other instances, even in my own life, in which simply being honest and forthright about yourself is a much better policy. And I didn't mean it to be normative across the board, that we should be honest or absolutely honest about absolutely everything in such a radical way that, I mean, for example, my son is 2, and my wife's grandmother passed away just a few weeks ago, and he doesn't understand death. So for me to continue telling him, no, when you're not ever going to see grandma again, and to be merciless in saying these things would be wrong.
Figure that
It would be
out
harmful.
eventually, yeah. But yeah, I agree with it totally. You know, and also in a relationship, I feel fortunate in that I feel that my wife and I have a high level of honesty and frankness. But I'll tell you something. I don't want a relationship with my wife where she feels obligated to be honest with me. I would rather we had a relationship where she felt comfortable with the risk and I provided her with an environment that was safe enough for her to risk and where I can be patient. And if there's something she needs to tell me that she's been holding on to for a while, maybe information that I really needed to know or something, I would hope that my response would be one of empathizing with whatever it was she was going through that made her feel that she had to forego the risk, you know, and so the kind of along the lines of the comment here from the viewer, that you know, so in this relationship, I feel fortunate that it is one that has this high level of honesty and frankness, and yet at the same time, I don't want it to have that level of frankness and honesty because there's some sort of moral law that is over our heads telling us, you know, you're not really being ethical if you're not. I would rather it be a behavior we engage in because we can experience that behavior as such a good idea in the context of our relationship. And so that's also another reason why I thought it might be good for us to talk about inspiring honesty. If we value honesty, if we see it as really a healthier thing than dishonesty, or at least a mark of healthiness, what are we going to do to improve the environment, to make it a healthier environment where those real risks can be taken?
Excuse me. I'm caught in my throat there a little. I'm recovering, or not recovering. I have a bit of a cold at the moment, but
Right.
you're right, and I think that there's something we said with being open to understanding that other people are human and that they may not always be comfortable being honest with you for whatever reason that may be. The appeal that I'm trying to make here, and I'm not trying to make any sort of absolute moral judgment. But it's an appeal. It realistically is as much an emotional appeal as a rational one. For people to be honest about themselves to themselves and the people that they care about. I think that primarily when I'm speaking about honesty, I don't mean honesty about other people about your situation, or somebody else's situation, about your thoughts about it. I mean, if somebody's wearing a dress that they absolutely love, it's their favorite dress, and you say, I hate it, I think it looks hideous, and that's brutal, and it's not accomplishing anything. But um, that's not really the kind of honesty that I'm talking about. What I mean in that is saying anytime we are hiding something out of a self-preservation and a fear, in a superficial sense, not in anything that is truly tangibly, I need to fear for my life, I need to fear for my livelihood, but in sort of a relational context of saying, I'm afraid of how my wife is going to react if she finds out about this, so I'm not going to tell her about this, is a fundamentally damaging position to take, and it can only lead to more problems in the long run. Uh, so
Yeah, but
that's really the appeal that I'm making, is that we should want to be honest. It is a good idea to be honest. It is functionally useful to be honest with the people that we care about ourselves. And anytime that we're not being honest, we really need to examine our motives for that and to question exactly what our goal is and what the eventual outcomes will be.
yeah,
Um,
I know
comment
where
on
some of
that,
my
though,
limits
is
are. For example, downstairs right now, there's about a half a piece of a chocolate chip cookie cake, and I'm gonna do whatever it takes to make sure I get the last piece.
uh,
So
I'm really hoping your wife is watching and going to eat that right now.
actually, it's my daughter's cake from her graduation. She graduated from college on Thursday,
Oh,
and
wow. Congratulations to her and to
yeah,
you as a proud
yeah,
dad.
yeah. So I'm really just kind of kidding, but no, I can agree with you in that uh, I to whatever degree honesty is not taking place for whatever reason, it is an indicator of some issue that it would be better if that issue could be resolved than if it can't be, whatever that may be. And so I do think that it is a worthy goal for us to desire to do what we can to nurture any environment so that it can have a better risk of honesty in it.
Hey, I can't disagree with you. I think that
So
summed up a lot of what
let's
I
talk
was saying.
about what are some of the things you think we could do that would inspire such honesty.
I
Uh,
think that the very first thing that we can do is starting with ourselves, in that we make the commitment to examine our own motives and examine our own positions anytime we are even considering not being honest, and making the commitment with ourselves to nip it in the bud in any situation that is possible.
yeah,
I think that seeing it in other people is one of the primary ways that um, any individual can be inspired to do something.
yeah. And I would also say that I think that the there are areas of honesty, and some areas of honesty are sometimes even difficult to perceive. But I think that a fundamental area of honesty that is important to develop and nurture is an honesty with ourselves about how we feel. And the reason I say that is because I do believe that emotions are not our response to reality. I think our emotions are a response to our perspective of reality. And if we're not going to be honest with what we are feeling, we can't be honest about what our perspective is. We can't be honest about what it is that really we're focusing on. And we can't be, therefore, honest about what it is we're ignoring, or other perspectives we're just not considering, or that we are dismissing. And that is a form of honesty that comes first. If you can get to the point where you can be comfortable being honest with your own feelings, even the uncomfortable ones, the anger, the anxiety, the sadness, the disappointment, the frustrations. If you can afford to be honest about having those feelings, I think you're creating an environment where the things you have to do to regulate and become comfortable with those will give you the clues you need to enable someone else to embrace an environment where they feel comfortable being honest.
Sorry, it seems every time I'm about to speak, I get the cough coming to my throat here. But, excuse me.
Would you want
I ran
to
out
say
of my drink.
while you're getting your voice back? I mean, something else I could add to that would be that in inspiring honesty in others, I think another thing that we can do is something that that I think both of you and I do on this show, is that from time to time as we're discussing things, we realize that the other person may have brought something up that we had never really thought about before, and to admit that and to say that shows that we're modeling a form of self-reflective honesty. That when we model that, it inspires in another. When we try to come across to other people as if I'm a stalwart, perfect person who never needs to change his mind or change his thinking, never has to admit to any kind of error, mistake, or miscalculation, to the degree that you're even successful at creating such an image is the degree to which you intimidate other people who think, oh, I better not let any of my faults show up around that person. But when we can be people who are transparent about our faux pas, transparent about the way we change things, transparent about the way we don't follow the norm, that can inspire others in another way of giving them the freedom to say, oh, okay, well, wait a minute, instead of me coming out of the cookie cutter, let me just be me for a moment, and I think that's another way that we can inspire honesty, and I think that you and I do that together, and it works out well in this show.
Well, and I think that's a wonderful point. I very sincerely believe that cultural change happens organically on its own, and there's arguments that can be made for the idea that the culture evolves entirely or as a whole, and that it reaches a point where the culture itself is ready for something new to happen. But I really think that there are triggers within the culture and things that need to happen for changes to be made. And I really see that one of the things that we can do that is by being bold and taking risks ourselves, and potentially suffering the consequences from that, but suffering those consequences with dignity and with the maturity to take true responsibility and say, yes, this is a consequence, and I accept it willingly. I'm not going to back down. I'm not going to deny that I did this. I did it because I believe it was right to do.
Yeah. And oddly enough, this is one of those ways in which a real weakness can be a real strength. To the degree that we can risk vulnerability, we gain the strength of inspiring honesty, and we then get to deal with the world that is coming at us in a manner that we can actually more depend upon it being what it appears to be. And there's a sense in which that weakness becomes a real strength.
We have a viewer comment here. It's actually a quote that somebody sent in. It's a wonderful one here. It says, when truth is replaced by silence, the silence is a lie. That's from, I'm sorry, I cannot pronounce that name. It's Yevgeny Yevtushenko. I'm going to try to say that. I'm sure I'm slaughtering it. Any guesses on your end, Bob?
Yeah, probably another communist, No.
Right. Those commie pinko scum.
Yeah. Of course, as true as that is, that can also be one of the ways in which, when we feel we can't be honest, we can manage the situations by just not saying anything. I mean, an example I gave there with this business partner, I just went silent. I didn't say a word. In fact, I've never said a word to this day to that person. Probably won't ever. Now that the risk is gone, it's moot. It's irrelevant, and probably probably would serve to hurt their feelings.
I can tell you, I am going to choose not to share the situation involved with it, but I can certainly say that I've had a very significant moment in my life where there was something that I knew and I felt that I needed to share with somebody, and I chose the wrong person to share that with. Not because that person used that information against me in any way, but simply that that person was the one who was not entitled to the information when the person who was entitled to it was the one I was avoiding telling. And that was, once again, reflecting that certainly led quite a bit into my opinion on this. But had I been honest from the very beginning, a huge amount of turmoil could have been avoided.
Yeah.
And that means honest with the people who deserved the honesty and with myself.
Right. Yes, I can understand. And haven't we all been there? We've all. I think we probably all shared information with people not entitled to it, and withheld information from people who really needed it, at one time or another. And we've seen the results of it, and I think we need to be honest with ourselves about what we did, and if possible, make reparations if that's possible.
I have to agree there. The only other thing we really have, we're coming up to the end of the show here. Joey always tells us that the show actually ends at 6:45. I believe it ends at 6:50. So regardless of what he thinks, I like to fill it out and make him squirm because I generally then still go over time. But the only other thing I wanted to do is a little bit of commentary on that last quote. That I agree that it's applicable in different situations. There is certainly ways that quote itself can be used manipulatively by somebody who wants information from you, and even it's been considered through, I believe it was a recent state Supreme Court case in California, that the choice to exercise silence when one is under arrest, the choice to invoke your Fifth Amendment right to not say anything, is one that can be considered or it can be considered in the litigious process. And I think that that's fundamentally wrong. That is a usage of this particular.
It's not clear to me exactly what you're saying there.
They said that basically by choosing to remain silent when you have the right to remain silent, it's almost an admission of guilt. And that can be explained to the jurors of a trial that this person is invoking their Fifth Amendment right. Their Fifth Amendment right is to not self-incriminate. They are choosing not to say something when I ask them this question because that would be incriminating themselves.
No, I think that the way that it's usually interpreted is that incrimination, when you're dealing with a prosecutor, you're dealing with somebody who's motivated to incriminate you, even if they don't have a case, and you have the right, as I would understand it, to not be the aid to their process. Because I tell you what, if you were to sit down with a police officer and tell them anything, there could be a way they could construe that and hold it against you, even if there's nothing you've done wrong. Yeah. There's a video I've seen on the internet where the guy talks about all these different ways in which it's actually happened to people who spoke up. You're talking to a police officer, just don't do it. But and then a police officer talked about all the tricks they use to get people to say things that they can hold against them, even if it's really just for leverage.
Oh, yeah, I absolutely agree. What I'm saying, though, is that the Supreme Court upheld that usage of the prosecution in saying that this person exercised their Fifth Amendment right, and that means that they are choosing not to say something because what they're saying could be self-incriminating. And I just want the jury to be aware of that. It was essentially an exercise of this particular quote in saying that because they're being silent, it means they're lying. And I think that there is one way to manipulatively exercise this. But of course, on the other end of it, there's also I believe it's the Martin Luther King Jr. quote that all that is needed for evil to prevail is for good men to stand by and do nothing. I think we are out of time for this week. We've effectively gone over time, which is always my goal. And I'm excited for next week for us to return. And the topic I want to discuss next week is one that is related to this in some extent. It is tribalism, the in-group, out-group dynamic and mentality that people have within and between any cultures that exist. So, and of course, beyond that, what we can do to help change that. So, this has been Inspiring Honesty. Thank you for joining us, and tune in again next week at 6 p.m. for another episode, Sunday night. And stick around after this for The Unconventional Pastor with my co-host, Bob Greaves.